Our next speaker is very, very exciting. If you want to grow your influence, our next speaker can show you the way. Callum is a New Zealander who has started, built, bought, and sold half a dozen businesses in a range of industries across 2 continents. He is a partner in a private equity company, Unity Group, director of multiple companies, and is co-founder and non-executive director of the Marketing Group PLC, listed in Europe. Become a key person of influence in your industry. Ladies and gentlemen, join me in welcoming the CEO of Key Person of Influence Asia, Mr. Callum Lying. Yay!
Cheers, mate. Good morning, everyone. Everyone good? Everyone good? All right, good. Now, I realise that a lot of speakers get concerned about doing the after-lunch speaking slots where everyone's tired. But in Singapore, I've realised it's actually way more dangerous to be doing the before-lunch speaking slot because I'm the person standing between you and lunch. So I will try and keep this brief and succinct, but hopefully I can give you a few things that will just enable you to win some better projects and hopefully complete those projects a little faster or a little more effectively. Can I just do a quick show of hands, first of all? Can I see who is self-employed or a business owner? Do we have any of those? Okay, a couple. So does that mean everyone else is an employee? Put your hands up. Put your hands up if you're not going to put your hands up. All right, good. So what I'll do, normally when I'm giving this presentation, it's to business owners, but increasingly I'm being brought into companies in order to help employees increase their influence. So just a quick word about influence. And I know a lot of what we've been discussing over the last couple of days in project management is very hard skills, a lot of data, a lot of deep process work. And influence might kind of feel like a little bit soft, a little bit fuzzy. I'd encourage you just for the next 40 minutes or so, just to be open to the idea that there's something to this that can help you in your business. And I want you to think about some high-profile figures that we all know. So if you think about somebody like Jamie Oliver, see, a lot of people believe that in order to get ahead in life, they need to get more qualifications. They need to learn more skills. And for the purpose of today, what I want you to be thinking about is actually you know everything you need to know. Right? So you can relax. You know everything that you need to know. What today is about is how you articulate your value and how you demonstrate value for more people. So if you look at Jamie Oliver, very, very influential. Do you think he would be more influential if he went out and got an additional qualification in nutrition, for example? No, not going to make a difference. At the moment in fitness, anyone that follows the fitness industry, there's a young Australian woman called Kayla Itzines, currently considered the most influential person in fitness. She's 23 years old. She's millions and millions of followers on Instagram. It will make absolutely no difference to her influence if she goes out and gets more qualifications. So within your own sphere of influence, I'm sure you know people in your industry that have got less qualifications than you, less experience than you, but managed to win better projects, managed to get those bigger projects and get them done faster because they've got more influence. So today what I'm going to share with you is 5 very simple ideas, but hopefully it'll allow you to accomplish those projects a little bit more effectively. Quick word on myself. Where am I pointing? So I'm not going to talk a lot about myself because it's really about you rather than me, but as was mentioned earlier, I've started, built, bought and sold a number of businesses. I'm not the expert in this area. I have failed so many times. Unfortunately, I'm a really slow learner, so I actually normally have to fail 2 or 3 times before I get the message. So I've struggled a lot with this, but I'm lucky enough to have come through that. Give you an example of how this works. 12 months ago, I became a partner in a private equity firm. I've got no private equity background. I've got no finance background. I also co-founded a marketing group. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be listing that marketing group in Europe, nearly 20 million euro market capitalization. We're on target this year for 100 million in revenue. There are plenty of people out there with way, way more private equity experience than me. There's people out there with way, way, way more marketing experience than me. The reason I was able to put that together is purely through being able to influence that network and provide solutions to other people. So what I'm going to share with you today is a little bit about how we do that. I'm going to give you a number of examples of how people that we work with at Key Person of Influence have used those skills as well. So, actually, Ringo, have you got a copy of the book? Sorry. So the idea of Key Person of Influence came about because of this book, Become a Key Person of Influence. Now, I didn't write the book, I wrote the foreword. Much, much easier to write a foreword than a whole book. Thank you. Do we have any authors in the room, by the way? Anyone written the book? Congratulations, that man. Very good. By the way, be thinking about questions, because the first person to ask a question at the end of this presentation gets that book. So Daniel Priestley wrote the book, and Daniel Priestley's been a friend of mine for about 10 years. He was a very successful young Australian entrepreneur, living in England. He ended up meeting a lot of very successful people, and what he realized through meeting them, spending time with them, was that they weren't necessarily any smarter than the rest of us. They hadn't been born with any unique talents that the rest of us didn't have. But what they were very, very good at doing was maximizing their value in a way that created value for the maximum amount of people. And so he spent some time working with them, and he ended up writing this book about the 5 steps needed to increase your influence in your industry. So the 5 things that we're going to touch on today, and I mentioned that these are pretty simple ideas, but they're really, really key. So the first one is your ability to pitch your idea to the world, your ability to communicate your value. Now, I imagine that you've been doing quite a lot of networking over the last couple of days. It's quite possible, maybe not, but it's quite possible you've met someone, you've asked them what they do, and you have no idea what they do. They talk at you, and you just, I have no idea what you're talking about. So we all struggle with this idea when we're trying to pitch and tell people what we do and articulate our value. Do we go very high level and just hope that people get it? Do we go into lots of depth but risk boring people? So understanding how to pitch your value is enormously important. Publishing your ideas. So we have a gentleman at the back that's written the book. Instantly he becomes an authority in his topic. It's never been easier to get your intellectual property out into the world. We'll touch on that. Productize your value. Productize is really what you're trying to shift away from this time for money model that a lot of people are stuck in. And I'm going to share a couple of ideas around how you can do that. Raising your profile. So a lot of people get the profile thing. There's a lot of stuff on the internet about you should have a Twitter account, you should be blogging every day. So a lot of people understand this idea about profile. Maybe they've tried raising their profile, but if they haven't got the other elements ready, then what happens is you're amplifying noise rather than actual influence. And the final one is partnerships. And partnerships is really the ultimate form of leverage. And that can be in internal partnerships with your teams, or it can be external partnerships. But you have to understand how they work. If you get all of those 5 things working together, you have a huge amount of influence in your industry, and you have your pick and choice of the opportunities that will come to you. So we're living in pretty incredible times. I think it's interesting when you look at the disruption that's happening, you look at the mega trends that are going on around the world. It can either be a very fearful time, or it can be a very energizing, very exciting time. As project managers, you have a unique opportunity to help businesses deal with the disruption that's happening in their businesses and to form a bridge between where they are now and where they want to get to. We've got some incredible trends happening. So here in Asia, there's this big shift from rural to urban communities. It's creating a lot of disruption. Globally, we've got shifts in demographics where We have something, I think in the US alone, 10,000 baby boomers a day are retiring and the implications that come with that. A lot of countries in Asia suffering the same as well. Equally, you've got some other countries that are very young, very booming. All of these things create disruption, and of course we're overhanging all of this is the technology disruption that is just changing at such a phenomenal pace that it's companies that were disruptive 2 years ago are already being disrupted by other companies. So wherever there's disruption, there's opportunity. You can either view it as a threat or you can view it as an opportunity. My belief is that it's a huge opportunity, and if you are someone that can help companies move from A to B and deal with this disruption, that makes you incredibly, incredibly powerful in your industry. The challenge is, if you don't stand out, then you're just a commodity. You're a commodity along with every other project manager. The only way that you can create real value in the world is to get out there. Now, I can't stand the whole personal brand thing. I've got to say, like when I see those articles on LinkedIn about the 3 ways to increase your personal brand, I tend to cringe. So I'm not going to talk too much about that. And the reason why not is that most of the stuff around personal branding is very insular focused. It's very much about you. Yet actually, if you look at anyone that is a real influencer, they're not looking at them, they're looking at how they can serve a wider market. They're looking at how they can create more results for their client targets. Actually, just on the topic of personal branding, can anyone just pull out your business card? Just pull out your business card. Make sure it is your business card and not somebody else's. Okay. Before the end of this presentation, I'm going to tell you one thing you can do with that should make a 6-figure difference to your income. So just hang on to that for now. So I mentioned earlier that when we normally talk about key person of influence, oftentimes we're focused on small business. And actually, if you go back to Tom Peters at McKinsey back in the 80s, he brought out a report, and it started to look at brand of you. And he's basically said, whether you're an employee or not, you need to be thinking of yourself as an organization, and you need to be thinking about the value that you create. Key person of influence was started by Dan to help entrepreneurs become influential in their industry. Over the last couple of years, we've seen a huge shift to corporations wanting to use the Key Person of Influence training program to grow and develop their staff. To the point where we put out a report recently called the Faceless Report. And actually, what's happened is a number of companies have realized that they can no longer be these big faceless organizations. That was really cool in the 80s. That was really important to be considered so big that you were beyond an individual. Today, consumers are looking for trust, and they need to see thought leaders within your organization. We work with, for example, KPMG in the UK, put a number of their partners through the Key Person of Influence program. And there's a couple of reasons that they do it. One is that they want to be perceived as being thought leaders in that area. Interestingly enough, the other reason that they do it is that they've noticed that there's this shift from the huge corporations to the small businesses. More and more people are leaving corporations, starting small businesses. There's a big, big shift. And a lot of companies have got no idea how you talk to small business owners. It's a very, very different conversation, very, very different language than the big corporates. So we put out the Faceless Report. I'm happy to send a copy to anyone that would like that. So the reason for stepping out, the reason for being influential in your industry is that we live in a very unfair world. This graph actually is a distribution of wealth. So I'm sure all of you have heard about Oxfam. Every year Oxfam puts out a report that says the 80 wealthiest people in the world own more wealth than the entire bottom 3.5 billion people on the planet. And it sounds outrageous, but then you look at Singapore, and the wealthiest people in Singapore own more than the bottom half of Singapore. You look at any industry. You look at Jamie Oliver. Jamie Oliver probably earns more than 60–70% of chefs worldwide. You look at sport, you have a few key players that earn huge amounts of money, and the rest of the industry earns very, very little. The way that you can start to move up that ladder is to become more influential. And again, it's not about necessarily being better. It's not about necessarily having more qualifications or more experience, because there are people out there less qualified but with more influence. So let's go through these. Perfect pitch. So I already touched on the fact that most of us do a lousy job when we meet people of articulating value. The interesting thing to think about in this is that when you're meeting someone, the chance of that person being your target market, whatever you're currently looking for, is very, very remote. The chance of them knowing someone that might be your target market is actually quite high. Most people know around 200 people. So you need to be articulating, you need to be pitching your value in a way that other people are willing to pitch on your behalf. I was brought into one of the big marketing groups to talk to their HR managers from around the region, and their complaint was that nobody read their emails. Now, this is not surprising to me, because in the history of business, nobody ever reads emails from HR. But when I talked to them, and they were working in the marketing industry, and I said, when you come into work in the morning, what do you see? And they said, there's always teams that have worked overnight. They're there trying to work on projects for clients, trying to just get like, what's that headline that will get somebody to click? Or what's that one image that will get people to click the video? And I said, great. And how much time do you spend crafting the subject line of these emails that you send out that nobody reads? Silence. So interestingly, we tend to take a lot of shortcuts. And your ability to pitch value is actually the most important thing, whether you're an employee, whether you're a business owner. And you can see this a lot with business owners. They're so close to what they do that they assume that everybody else knows what they know. And so when they pitch what they do, oftentimes the message gets lost. So one of the things that I'll get you guys to try over lunch is, just when you're meeting somebody new, I want you to try this. Tell them what you do, who you work for, your job title, and then tell them something remarkable about you. A project that you've been involved in, an article that you've written, something that makes you stand out. Now, the problem we all of us have with this is that we tend to underrate the things that we've done. We tend to think, well, I've done it, anyone can do it. But actually, if you don't get out there, if you don't talk about the things that make you different, then nobody else is going to do it for you. So you need to start getting comfortable with not only doing remarkable things, but then letting people know so that they can go out and talk about it on your behalf as well. Actually, the interesting thing is that we've got 5 steps here. If you ignored the last 4 steps and just focused on understanding how to communicate better, how to communicate your value better, and persuade people, you would find that the differences are astronomical. When we get into publish is really about helping to build your authority. Now, I noticed that, so we've only got one person in the audience that's authored a book. When we talk about publish, we're not necessarily talking about books, although I'll come back onto that. We live in a world now where it's very, very easy for you to publish your thoughts. But the question that comes up a lot is, who am I? Who am I to share what I know? But I would encourage you to think about, for example, people coming into your industry. People that don't know what you know. Looking around the room, you all look very young and attractive, obviously, but I'm guessing most of you have got more than 5 years experience in your industry. That gives you a huge advantage over somebody that's new to your industry. So if you can take some of your learning, some of your ideas, some of the things that have come to you over the years, some of the strategies that you've used for dealing with what you do, and start to communicate those out to the world, you'll already start to stand out from other people. Now, you might feel that the world really doesn't need another article that says the 7 most important things about project management. You'll never believe number 9. But actually what happens is the people that would potentially hire you, or the people that would potentially work for you, are looking for what you think about things. They're looking for how you're making a dent in the universe. The reality is, we are who Google says we are. People will search for you, and if you haven't got content out there, but somebody else is putting out content, that's what people are going to be reading. So you need to kind of get over this challenge, and a lot of the people that come to us for the KPI program, that's their biggest hurdle, is thinking, who am I to share this knowledge? I had a really interesting conversation with one of our clients in Australia, and he was really struggling with this. He wanted to write a book, and every time he sat down to write the book, he thought about his favorite authors. Now, his favorite authors were people like Tim Ferriss from 4 Hour Workweek, Guy Kawasaki, The Art of the Start. And every time he sat down to write, he would think about them, and he would think about them reading his content, and he would stop doing it because they were so much better at what they did than him, and so he wouldn't do it. Put it off for months and months and months. And then he realized he wasn't writing the book for his heroes. He was writing the book for people like his flatmate at university. And in this particular case, this guy was writing a book about how men can learn to become more gentlemanly, can learn to become fitter, stronger, healthier, become alpha males, but in a way that supports society. And so his target market was his former flatmate, slacker, confused by all the information out there, chooses to do nothing as a result of it. And so what he did is he put a photo of his flatmate in his boxer shorts, drinking beer on the couch. He had a photo of that. He put it on his computer. And every article that he wrote, and in fact his entire book, was written specifically for this person in mind. And writing it for him, he actually knew that there were loads of things that he could do to help this particular individual. So if you're struggling with thinking, well, what would I write about? Think about somebody that's maybe new in your company, that doesn't know the insider rules that go with your company, doesn't know the tricks that you've learned over the years, and write for them. So I said that publishing is not necessarily about the book. However, it's never been easier to write a book, and I'm not saying it's easy to write a book. It's, as I mentioned earlier, much, much easier to write a foreword if you want to get published than a whole book. But it's never been easier to write a book. Most of the people that come through our program, we share with them, we do something called a 30-day challenge. And over 30 days, we get each of our clients to write 1,000 words a day. Now, the interesting thing is, for some people that's quite easy, for other people that's a bit of a challenge. We make a contest around it. So generally we have about 25 people at a time. If all 25 people write 1,000 words, so the cumulative word count hits the right number, then everyone in the group wins an extra day's training. If one person is 1 word below, the whole group loses out. It's cruel, isn't it? It's horrible. But what it means is at the end of 30 days, everyone has 30,000 words. Now, interestingly, a book like this is about 25 to 30,000 words. So once you get into the habit of going through this process, it's actually relatively easy to get a book, send it off to an editor, get it published. We recommend self-publishing because for us, a book is not about trying to get book sales. So a lot of people pour their heart and soul into writing a book and then spend the rest of their lives trying to sell it. We don't care about that. You make way more money from giving a book away and winning a $100,000 contract or winning a $10,000 speaking gig than you will ever get from selling a $20 book. So the idea of the book is to position you as an authority. And we call it a business card on steroids because if you go into a meeting and you give them a copy of your book, it makes a huge difference. Even if they never read that book, it makes a huge difference because they know that you've taken the time to think about it. And interestingly, one of the key things that we get from people that go through this process is about the clarity of their learning. See, most of us are so busy, constantly going, we never actually stop to see what we've learned and what we really know. Most people in this room can write about 7,000 to 10,000 words pretty easily without having to think too hard. Once you go beyond that, you actually have to start going back into your stories. You have to start going back into your memory and looking at why do you do things the way you do them. Interestingly, when I was going through this process, I realized that there was one particular tactic that I had picked up because my very first boss on my very first day had said something to me. And it had made such an impression on me. I was so nervous on my first day that I was like, right, that's gospel. I've got to do that. Within a year, I'd forgotten that my boss had said that to me, but I kept doing it. And now I teach it to my employees. And I've never actually stopped to consciously think whether that was an intelligent thing to be doing or not. So going through the process of writing a book gives you a lot of insight into what you've learned over the years. Productising your skill. So this is tends to be a bit of a controversial piece for a lot of professionals are charging by the hour for their services or by the year if you're an employee, or by the month, whatever it is. Now the problem with this is that you're fundamentally setting yourself up against your client. Now your client could be your employer, your client could be whoever you're selling the services to. They want the result as quickly as possible. It's not in your interests to give them the result as quickly as possible. So even though you're highly ethical, you will work as hard as you can to do it as quickly as possible, fundamentally, there's a disconnect whenever you charge by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the month. And that's always going to be in people's minds. If you can shift to a point where you start charging by result, then what happens is you can charge a much, much higher premium because people always want the result, not the process. So I'll give you a great example of this in effect. There's a personal trainer that we worked with in the UK. Guy's name was Lazo Friedman, and he came to us. He was doing okay, but he was working 16 hours a day. He was working with businessmen before breakfast and then after work, and he was just kind of burnt out. And when we asked him what his pitch was, I'm Lazo Friedman, I'm a personal trainer, I charge £30 an hour. And so over the course of the program, we explained to him that, look, when you're charging by the hour, you've got this conflict of interest. Obviously, the client wants to get fit and strong and ripped as quickly as possible. You don't want them to ever stop working with you. So he changed his model and he changed his pitch. He also hyper-niched it, which is a really key area. It's getting very clear. And so we asked him, if you can niche down, who do you really want to work with? A lot of people in the media talk about following your passion and all that sort of stuff, but I actually think a way more valuable question to ask yourself is, who do you want to work with? Who are the people that are actually fun to work with? So anyway, when we asked Lazo this question, he said, fat executives. That's who I want to work with. Because at the moment he was working with rugby players, he was working with pregnant mums, he was working with kids. He said, I want to work with fat executives. And we said, all right, why do you want to work with them? And he said, well, executives tend to think in terms of results. If they come to me and they say they want to see a six-pack, they work out until they see a six-pack. So, okay, that makes sense. So he changed his pitch, and his pitch became, he went from, I'm a personal trainer, his pitch became, my name's Lazo Friedman, I do radical 12-week body transformations, but I only work with executives and directors who do amazing things in the boardroom, but look really average in the bedroom. And I charge £10,000 on result. So he shifted from £30 per hour to £10,000, which is about $20,000, for the result. Now, an interesting thing happened. So Lazo's quite a good-looking fella, and quite regularly he would have women come up to him in the gym and say, you know, would you be my personal trainer? And he would say, no, I'm sorry, I only work, and he'd give his pitch. And these women would go, oh, I know someone who looks average in the bedroom. And so the next day he would end up with these irate husbands standing in front of him saying, my wife says that I should hire you as my personal trainer. I've already got an expensive personal trainer. Why am I going to pay you £10,000? And Lazo said, that's the wrong question. The question is, why would I take you on as a client? Now, if I take you on as a client, you eat what I tell you to eat, you train when I tell you to train, you sleep when I tell you to sleep, and in 12 weeks' time, you'll have a six-pack and you'll give me a £10,000 check. And these executives went, yep, fair enough, I'll do that. He signed up 25 executives in the space of 3 months. That's about 500,000 Singapore dollars for a personal trainer. It's not bad. Interestingly enough, the people that he was targeting, executives and CEOs in the City of London, they loved the fact that they were spending a fortune. So that he became one of the most expensive personal trainers in London. Of course, all his target market would all go around and go, yeah, I've got the most expensive personal trainer in London. They loved it. And so he took that one step further. He became even more obnoxious to his clients. Now, if you want to work with him, you have to pay £2,000 non-refundable deposit, and you have to take a photo of everything that passes your lips for the 12 weeks. If you miss 2 photos, you lose the £2,000, you go back, and there's a queue of people. So you go back to the queue, back to the end of the queue. So you've got all of these directors in London who go, oh, got drunk last night, had a kebab, I've got to go back to the back of the queue, just lost another £2,000. They're idiots, but he knows this market really, really well. He pitches it directly to them, and they love it. And the nastier he is to them, the more they queue up for him. So shifting from time-based to result-based is a very, very powerful model for increasing your value in the world. As I mentioned earlier in the publishing section, we all have this intellectual property. All of the things that we love about our industry, all of the things that we hate about our industry, all of these things about the way we think new staff should be trained or the way we think customers should be treated, that's all your intellectual property. While it's sat up here, it's completely worthless. Well, it's not worthless, you get a wage for it. But the minute it comes out, the minute you can turn it into a product, whether that is, it could be a video tutorial you put out, it could be your articles you put out, it could be a 6-week training course that you do through one of the online platforms. But the minute you productize your knowledge, it becomes more valuable. It's a way of getting your brand out further, and it's an additional revenue stream. But more importantly, it allows to get you out into the marketplace. If you look at somebody like, again, Jamie Oliver, he has an entire ecosystem around him. You might come across Jamie Oliver because somebody lends you a cookbook, or you might see him on TV. That's a free way to engage with him. You might decide to buy a cookbook, or you might decide to go to his restaurant. So it's a very low-priced way to get involved. You might end up deciding that you want to buy a franchise of one of his restaurants, or you might want to take him into your community to try and improve health in that community. So at any level, there are ways that you can get involved with him, but he's created this ecosystem around him. And you'll see anyone with any influence manages to create an ecosystem around them. So I want to talk about profiles. So the idea behind profiles, I mentioned earlier, is about amplification. It's about making your ideas spread further. And the reason that these 5 Ps are in the order that they're in is that if you haven't figured out the earlier bits, if you haven't figured out your pitch, your target market, how you can create value for them, then amplification is actually just static. It's just noise. And there's an awful lot of noise out there already. If you get it right, it becomes incredibly, incredibly powerful. So we have, as I mentioned, we've got a number of clients that we work with here in Singapore. These are just a couple that have come out in the last couple of days. The head of Expat Insurance is a client of ours. She's on the front cover of a magazine in a swirly dress. I tried to get on the front cover of a magazine in a swirly dress, and nobody was doing it. Stephanie's been profiled in Asian. What happens when you get profiled in the media, what happens when you start to amplify your message is that the bigger opportunities come to you. People see how you could be a component in their business. So most of us have ideas, okay, I want to go and pitch this project, or I want to work with this client. And you can go out and do that, but it might not be the right time for them. But the minute other people start talking about you, the number of opportunities, the number of people that can potentially work with you, can potentially see how you can create value for them increases. Now, part of the challenge that all of our clients face is that once they go through this process, they start to get bombarded by inbound opportunities. You think about a Jamie Oliver or Richard Branson, these guys never go out looking for opportunities. All they have to do is wake up in the morning and curate in fact, they've got teams of people that wake up in the morning and curate their inbox. Think of all the opportunities that are coming in, day out. Most of us tend to have very few opportunities, and therefore, when we do have an opportunity, we tend to jump at it. One of the biggest challenges when you start to become influential in your industry is that you're going to get tons of opportunities. You're going to get invited to sit on boards. You're going to get invited to go and give keynote presentations. You're going to get invited to write columns. The challenge is knowing what to say no to. And the way that you find out what to say no to is getting really, really clear on your target market and how you're creating value to that individual market. So I want to finish up with partnerships, because partnerships is really where you leverage this whole thing up one more level. If you're a business owner, this is where you start sticking zeros on the end of the game. If you're working internally, you already know that your ability to get your job done is your ability to create great partnerships, either within your organization or without. It's such a significant builder, but you've got to understand the way that it works. I've got a book coming out next month called Progressive Partnerships. One of the things that started me on this path of working in partnerships is this concept of the illusion of limited resource. Now, as a business owner, but I think it's no different as employees, we tend to think there's a lack of what we need, right? We always need something. If you're a business owner, that's normally clients, or it's staff, or it's distribution. And we get stuck in this mindset of we haven't got enough of what we need. Now, when I learned this concept of ILR, it's just an illusion. What you realize is that whatever you need, somebody else has got that in abundance. The challenge, and this is where it gets really frustrating, the challenge is, how do I get it from over there to where I need it? Just understanding that other people have got money if you need money doesn't actually help you. It actually makes it more frustrating. And so over the years, I've developed a framework. All of the businesses that I've built over the years have been built on partnerships. Now, it's been argued that that's because I'm lazy and I want other people to do the work. Maybe an element of truth in that. But I genuinely believe if you can find somebody else that can do what you need better, then find a way to partner with them. What really cemented this for me is I was working with Amelia Ong, who until last year was head of regional partnerships for Google. And her direct line of responsibility was to the X Labs, which is the kind of the moonshot piece for Google. So that's where they come up with those crazy ideas. And what she said to me was, they've got these mad scientists that come up with these crazy concepts. Like, so some of them have now come to fruition. Like, you've got the Loon project, which is balloons giving internet. You've got the contact lens that measures the dextrose in your tears or whatever it is. They come up with this concept. The first question that they ask is, who can we partner with to get this out to market? Now, Google, I tend to never use Google as an example in any of the stuff I do because everyone goes, yeah, Google, they've got so many resources, they've got so much talent, it's not really relevant to me. Yet in this case, it's relevant particularly because they've got so many resources. So even with all of the resources that Google has got open to it, its first question when it comes up with an idea for a product is who can we partner with that can help us get this to market faster, better, more efficiently. And only if they can't find someone to partner with will they try and look at it internally. And if a company like Google asks that question first, surely we should be asking that question a little bit earlier on in the process. She tells some amazing stories. So one of the stories that she shared was when she first heard about the Project Loon, so this idea about floating weather balloons and beaming internet down to the masses. And they said to her, okay, can you go out and form some partnerships? And typically they would come to her about 3 years before the product was ready to go to market. So she had to go to governments and try and partner with governments to get airspace over their country for a product that wouldn't exist for 3 years. Rather her than me. I've tried going to governments with real products, and it's a challenge. One of the things that I've found is a really useful framework, and let me share a quick story here on that. Let me check my time. Okay. Quick story on this. A few years ago, I ran a company called Networking for Success in Thailand. There was a big property development company that was spending a fortune in Bangkok trying to attract buyers for its property. It had a massive, massive marketing budget, and myself and my MD, we wanted some of that marketing budget. So we sat down and we said, okay, how can we create enough value for this company that we can take some of that budget and put it into our bank account? And we used something called the value ladder. So we decided to create a property network. So the idea would be to fill that property network with potential buyers and then get this property development company to sponsor the network. The problem was we didn't know anything about property. We didn't know anyone in the property industry. We had no value in there. Had I gone to them directly and said, will you sponsor this network we're about to create, they would have laughed me out of the building. So we used the value ladder proposal. The way the value ladder starts is you start by doing any deal at all that will move you forward. The deal that we did is we did a quick search on Google. We found that there were 2 property magazines in Bangkok. One was really good, one was really bad. So we approached the really bad one. And all I wanted was a deal that they couldn't say no to. So I phoned them up and I said, look, you've probably got lots of back copies of magazines. We're going to start a property network. Would you mind giving me some old magazines that I can give out as door prizes to people that come in? And they were like, yeah, definitely. It's just taking up space. So a couple of hours later, we went around, we picked up a bag of these magazines, and they're like, so tell us all about this property network. I said, it's all a bit hush-hush at the moment, because we didn't know what it was. So anyway, we took this bag of magazines, we went to the pub. But this was a strategic beer, because we needed a venue for this property network. So we said to the bar manager, we were sitting there reading our magazines, trying to figure out who else would sponsor this network. The bar manager comes over and we said, look, we're going to hold this network. We're going to bring in 30 high net worth individuals that are going to be potentially buying properties. We want to hold it once a month. We notice you're normally full on here, but on Monday night you're empty. So once a month, would you like us to bring 30 people to your pub? Although actually we might do it in the pub across the road. And he went, no, you can do it in this pub. I'll give a free glass of beer to everyone that comes in first Monday of the month. Great. So we now had a venue. We now had a media partner. But we kept going out. And the next stage was, even with those 2 things, we still weren't going to get anyone to come along to this event. Like, a glass of free beer in Thailand is not actually that appealing. So we had to do something more. So the next thing we did, we looked in through the magazine, who was advertising the most. We found some real estate agents. We went to a real estate agent and we said, look, we're going to set up this network. We want to offer you a gold sponsorship package. Now, a gold sponsorship package means that you get your banner, you get the database, but more importantly, you can bring 30 of your staff along, and they can each bring one guest, one home buyer that you're trying to impress. So you can bring them along. So that would normally be worth 50,000. We're going to give it to you for free. We don't want you to take a risk. We want you to be a partner for a year. Only at the end of the first year, if you've got value from being a partner, will we ask you to sign up for a second year. So absolutely no risk. Of course, they leapt at the opportunity. They thought that was fantastic. They had a couple of concessions. One concession was they wanted to offer a prize at each event. It was 2 nights stay at one of their most luxury properties. And they also wanted to use our logo on their adverts to say that they were a gold sponsor of our network, which is a bit of a challenge because we didn't have a logo at that point. We just had a bag full of magazines and a beer in our belly. But we kept doing this. We kept just bouncing up, going to anyone, just doing deals that we could do that were easy to make happen. And we got to a point within about 3 weeks that we had a whole ream of contracts that had been signed. We had people. We knew that we were going to have about 200 or 300 people that could potentially come along to this event. Actually, the other magazine found out what we were doing and offered us a quarter-page advert for free, so we can now give our sponsors media exposure. They just wanted, in return, they wanted to give all of our attendees 3 months free subscription to their magazine. So we had a really good goodie bag, we had a venue, we had all of these things. We still didn't have any money, right? All of this stuff had been for free, but we kind of built up this thing. And then after about 3 weeks, we get this phone call, and the phone call is from the property development company, Henry, the marketing manager. He says, look, for the last couple of weeks, every single meeting I've been into, people have been talking about you and this property network. Why am I the last person to hear about this? Oh, Henry, I'm really sorry. We've been really busy. We're working with this company. We're working with it. He cut me off. He said, look, how do I get involved? I said, oh, we've only got one sponsorship slot left, and it's the naming rights for the year. But I'll send you a contract today. If you get it back to me today, the slot's yours. He's like, fine, do it. And we sent it across. He signed it, paid for it. So 4 weeks in, we hadn't even run a networking event at that point. All of that money was profit. And interestingly, the one thing that we'd learned from doing this, so we didn't really like the property market. People that we met weren't that interesting, so we didn't actually want to run the event. So we went back into the network, the people that we had met, and sold the whole thing to somebody else. So there was a young real estate guy that was trying to make a name. He bought the whole thing off us, became the leader of that network, and it went on for a couple of years. He was basically buying a revenue stream. I've used that model over and over again in a number of businesses. It's a very, very useful way to get yourself moving forward. It starts with focusing on what you need, understanding the needs of the people that you're working with, getting traction by doing any deals just to move things forward, looking at how you can scale the thing up again, refining your proposition, and then expanding it. In this case, expanding it would either have meant for us franchising the model into different cities or just selling it to somebody else. But it's a useful framework. That book's coming out. I've got a synopsis copy of it. Hello, hello. Right, clearly need to have better stories. All right, I am nearly finished. So one of the key ideas I want you to get, and it's the thing that I started with right at the beginning, is that this is not, in order to become influential in your industry, in order to attract the opportunities that come with this, it's not about getting more qualifications. It's not about going out and having to learn more stuff. It's about understanding you're already standing on a mountain of value. The challenge is, when you're standing on a mountain of value, what you tend to do is look at the peaks of all the mountains around you and say, wow, they look really cool. If you look down at your own mountain, you just see mud. It's not that exciting. So you need to get over this idea. Every single person that's in this room has got a mountain of value. You've got things about your industry that you love. You've got things about your industry that you hate. All of those things are value. Once you get them out of your head, you get them published, you get them productized, you can go out and you start to attract some really, really cool opportunities around you. With that, I will take any questions. And the first person that asks a question gets a book. Actually, before I do that, I asked all of you to get a business card out. What I am going to do, because I've got a good number here, if you take your business card out, in the second row, Ringo, do you want to go and stand by the door? What I'll do, anyone that gives a business card to Ringo, Ringo is a professional business card collector. He's very, very good at it. We will invite you along to a little workshop and give you a free copy of this book, and I can also send you a preview of my book. So if you're not the first person to ask a question, I've just destroyed the motivation for asking questions now, haven't I? We have a question at the front. Yes, I give you a mic, but...
So then in that workshop you mentioned that you get these students, the participants, to write 1,000 words per day for 30 days.
Yep.
In your experience, how many of those batches of 25 participants end up actually self-publishing books?
So we have, it's about 60% worldwide. So not everyone does. Not everyone... so a lot of people end up taking that content and publishing it in industry journals, because it's not about the book, it's about getting your ideas in front of the right people. And oftentimes you can get published on the right website, it'll be seen by way more people than your book. But interestingly, we had a woman that was doing relocation services for expats, and her focus was on making sure that the families were really, really looked after. Because oftentimes what happens is the expat moves over, the senior manager, they love the job, they're doing really well, but if the family's unhappy, they're going to have to bounce again. So her focus was on families. She came through the program and she said, look, I'm not writing a book, absolutely not, no interest, don't want to do it. After seeing a few people and the results that she got, she decided to write a book, but what she decided to do was only publish 100 copies. Right? She had no interest in being on Amazon. She had no interest in any of that stuff. She published 100 copies and sent one copy each to the CEO of the top 100 companies that she wanted to work with. And she knew that if only 3 of them hired her, that she had a $1.5 million business. That was her target. So the reality is there's not a single CEO is going to read a book about making expat families happy, right? But inside that book, she said, look, there's a little workshop for HR managers, give this to them. And it probably sat on people's desks, but immediately it positioned her as the authority. And when expats left for that reason, the HR manager gets a call, get this woman in here, we're going to make this happen. So it's about being the authority to your target market. You work here, I can't give you a book. That's cheating. I'll send you one.
Do we have any more questions?
Anyone else? Yeah, one on the back.
When you were talking about moving from a time-based to a result-based result-based kind of outcome, how do you mitigate that risk? Because there's always the risk that you're not going to reach the result. For example, with your friend, that the executive's not going to get the six-pack. How do you mitigate that risk, in your opinion?
Yeah, so there's a couple of ways of doing it. I mean, one of the things is that you can set up some criteria. So he was very clear about the type of people he would work with, and he was very clear about the rules that they had to follow. So if they didn't follow those rules, then they weren't going to get the result, and therefore it was them at fault. But generally, like if you come at it from the perspective of making sure, like genuinely wanting to help your client get to that result, then actually it becomes very, very attractive, and people will pay a premium for it, because if you're promising that result, then you'll throw resources at it in order to get that result. So again, if you take the Key Person of Influence program that we do, it's a 6-month program. We guarantee that anyone that comes on the program is going to pitch bigger than they've ever pitched before, that they're going to get published, that they're going to have products, all of these things. We're very selective about who we let onto the program. Like we've got books and YouTube channels full of case studies that make us look wonderful because we've made our clients look wonderful. But we reject about 30 people, 30% of the people that apply to get onto the program, because we want to be known by the success of our clients. So there's a few ways you can do it, but it's actually it's a really, really significant shift in thinking. But it gets you around the other side of the table, sitting with your client, saying, okay, what's the result you need? How do we get you to that? As opposed to that sort of inherent conflict that's there by time-based. You get a book, by the way.
If not, ladies and gentlemen, can I invite the co-chair for the symposium, Mr. John Lee, to give a token of appreciation to our Mr. Influence, Mr. Callum Lyon. So, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Influence.